What's up, everybody, and welcome in to another edition of the Sit Down. As always, if you enjoy this video, please make sure you hit that like button and let me know what you think of today's discussion in the comment section below. If you're new around here, you just haven't done it yet. We're living in a rocket. Seeing this video for the first time, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button below now so you never miss another sit down video. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to get into another interesting organized crime topic. And today, we're going to do something a little different. I can't say I haven't done this before over my course of being here on YouTube, though. Today, we're going to do a film review. And yes, I watched the film The Alto Knights recently, starring Robert De Niro. I'm going to get into what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and if you are into the mafia, if you're interested in mob history, is it worth watching? Let's delve into it here on the sit down. As many of you know, this film was released around a month ago and it stars Robert De Niro in a very familiar role. He plays a gangster. Now, the writer of this film was Nick Pileggi, who obviously, if you know anything about him, he was involved with Goodfellas many years back and is in his 90s. And I think that's the issue with this film straight out. Here's this just dull truth. I don't think a film starring gangsters without Scorsese is worth it. You just can't do it to me at this point. Pileggi's great. Barry Levinson's great. But even Scorsese, Levinson, Irvin Winkler, all these people, they're old. And this film struck me as just written by old guys. Like I think it is dull at certain points. Like there's action and it's fun and it's explosive, but it just didn't have that tinge to me. Look, obviously, anytime De Niro's on screen and plays a gangster, in this case, he plays two gangsters. It is great. That said, look, is this The Irishman? No. I don't know that it tried to be. It did have a similar feel to it, though, with kind of the storytelling of De Niro kind of retelling it. And this is kind of how these films are great. I mean, they had this in Goodfellas. They had this in The Irishman. To me, and I heard critics say this was kind of an Irishman light, and I think that was a really good way to describe it. I did also like how in the film they have like screens that kind of end scenes, like where it doesn't constantly just play through. There's almost kind of like a documentary feel to it a bit, where it is very much in the timeline of what's happened. They start with the infamous hit on Frank Costello at the Sheraton Hotel. I thought that was a really good scene. It's kind of right in the beginning. Chin Gigante, which that was one of the things about this film that I wasn't a big fan of. This film was very factual. There was very little about it that wasn't factual, but they kind of cast, and I guess the thought was they casted the Chin character as kind of a dopey guy, which is the furthest thing from the truth. If we know anything about Chin, he's one of the most brilliant kind of intellectual people that has ever been connected to the mafia. But they cast this guy to play him, and I don't know, he didn't quite look like this photo of him, but they casted him as kind of a dopey guy. Like he was, how could he get this wrong? Which again, I'm sure that's what they said back then, but they made him out to be this like errand boy, which I guess he was initially in his career. But back when we think about this whole Chin thing and how he missed with Frank Costello, you have to wonder how he wasn't whacked. I mean, that has always been a very big question to me over the years as someone who I guess you could call a quarter of a historian, if you will, how Chin Gigante wasn't taken out by Vito Genovese, which I guess we all have to wonder. But even throughout the film, this character is kind of, it almost seems like he's like truly mentally retarded. Like it's weird. I didn't understand this whole cast at all. In a film that I thought casted really well, I didn't really understand this guy at all, the guy that played Chin Gigante. But essentially, the big kind of elephant in the room in this film is why the people involved with this had De Niro play both parts. And I guess on one hand, it's, they are very different people. I mean, Frank Costello and Vito Genovese were totally different. One was kind of a diplomatic pragmatist who was all about making money and not being involved in the streets, really kind of the furthest thing from what we know of as a gangster. And Vito Genovese was the opposite. He was a person who meddled in narcotics. He had no problem taking people out. very violent, very evil guy. Why having De Niro play both parts literally made no sense. And I don't think any critic that talked about this film liked it. It almost was weird too. I mean, you had to kind of, it was almost too much at times. Like when, like in this scene where they follow each other into like a candy store to like talk, it's just, you had to focus on it too much. And I think it did take away from the film. The good thing about this was there wasn't a lot of them on camera together. There were obvious scenes that they were on camera involving that one, and then maybe one or two others. But I thought when they weren't on camera together, it was fine. I didn't have much issue with it because I think the stark contrast of how different they are was enough. If they were really similar people, this would have been a bizarre, really bizarre type of thing. I just don't really get why they did it. And I think that's what made The Irishman great because the right characters played the right people. I thought, to be quite honest, I thought, and I heard another person talk about this that discussed the film, maybe like a Christopher Walken to play Vito Genovese or someone like that. Obviously, all the people involved in these, mob films, they're quite old. And I think when we look back at the Pilegis and the Winklers and the Levinsons who were all involved in this, they're all either in their 80s or 90s. And this is where I think these films do lose their panache a little bit. But then I also think this is where they preserve some of their greatness. Now, some of the great things about this film, number one, was the casting. I thought some of the casting was terrific. I thought Deborah Messing, who played Frank Costello's wife, I thought she was really good in this. The one thing that wasn't factual about this film is that they named her Bobby Costello, which, if you know anything about Frank Costello, he did not have a wife called Bobby. In fact, her name was Loretta. Loretta, he married her, Loretta Goggerman, in, I think, the 40s, I believe. So I'm not sure why they casted a different name for her. Although I thought she was really good in this film. And it's funny because the one thing I did notice too is that both gangsters' wives were opposite as well, which I found very interesting. And Deborah Messing's character actually references this when Vito Genovese marries Anna Genovese, who is played by Catherine Narducci. She's a veteran in these types of films. She would play Joe Pesci's wife in The Irishman. Deborah Messing's character states to Frank, she's just like him in terms of Vito. They're both hot, kind of crazy, and initially it worked well, but then it completely dissolved and went bad. This was another really good casting as far as Anna Genovese, Catherine Narducci. The real Anna Genovese, they actually look kind of similar, was, I think, as crazy as Vito. If we remember, she ran a club called Club 82. She was very involved in the gay nightclub scene, the drag nightclub scene. She ends up kind of testifying and kind of unearthing a lot about Vito Genovese in court. And this is where I think the film really opens up. And I think there was a tale of two films. I thought the last 30 minutes of this film was really, really good. And I think that's one of the knocks that I have on both this film and The Irishman. And I think The Irishman, I'm kind of on the ledge of believing, I think The Irishman is truly one of the best mob films ever made. I know a lot of people it was wasted on. It was long. And I'm going to get to, I think, the things they learned about The Irishman, which I think hurt this film. But the last 30, 40 minutes of The Irishman is a masterpiece. I thought this was as well. It was very good. And the casting of both women in this film, both Catherine Narducci and Deborah Messing, were really good. I think one of the other things that I really liked about this film is it was very factual. There was very little about this film that wasn't actually true. A lot of the times they'll take, creative kind of umbrage and kind of do what they want to do with films. They didn't do that here. Not only did they reference some of the bigger names in that time, like an Albert Anastasia, and they had veteran Michael Rispoli play Anastasia, they also referenced kind of smaller known gangsters, maybe not necessarily known to the public, like a Tony Bender Strollo, who, if you know anything about Tony Bender, he was essentially Vito Genovese's right-hand man. And I got to tell you, I thought the guy that played Tony Bender was terrific. A guy that I wasn't really familiar in. in Robert Uracola. He did a really good job. And what's kind of sad about this is he actually died back late last year, I believe. So I think he died kind of right before the film was kind of set and released. But I thought Uracola did a really good job as a Tony Bender Strallo. And that's the cool thing. They reference some of these smaller characters. You know, they have a Tommy Lucchese, they have a Carlo Gambino, Joe Bonanno, like all these people are referenced. And I thought they do a pretty good job actually of casting them and having them kind of look like the characters. I think that's one of the things about mob films that I'm not a big fan of, particularly in like the Gotti HBO version. I think you can make it clear that, like, to us people that enjoy mob stuff, I think it's probably one of the best mob films ever. The big issue I had with it, though, is while some of the casting was really good, like Gotti, like the Neil Della Croce character with Anthony Quinn, some of the other casting was horrible. Like the Peter and Gene Gotti characters, like, look nothing like them. In fact, they should have been reversed to play the opposite characters. I thought this film did a really good job with that. Throw in the fact that when we're looking at historical accuracy, the final 30 minutes convey not only the hit on Albert Anastasia, which the hit on Albert Anastasia in this film is awesome. It's really good. It's violent. It's dirty. It's everything that you think of that was. And I know they did it in The Irishman, but this was way better in my opinion. The hit on Albert Anastasia, the again factual basis behind, you know, the individuals running into the subway, which we know is factual. Very, very good. I thought that was a really good part of this. And kind of the lead up. And what's cool about the actual assassination of Anastasia in this film is it's back. It's not only that, but they kind of play other parts of it, like his family, what they're doing, what Frank Costello's doing. It's very, very well done. They also do, you know, the last 10 or 15 minutes of this film is very deep into the Appalachian meeting, which obviously, if you know anything about Vito Genovese, Frank Costello, Vito Genovese kind of looked at as it's his kind of crowning ceremony. He's the man now. And I thought they were really detailed with that too. There's a lot about Appalachian that we haven't really seen on the big screen. And this film did a really good job of little small details that I think, again, if you know about the mob and the mob history, you know, for instance, the amount of food that they had ordered, the fact that, just the little things about it were really, really good. The arresting of all the guys, some of them getting away. I did, though, feel maybe it was a little rushed. And that's one thing about this film that I think was hampered by a film like The Irishman. The biggest knock on The Irishman was it was too long, right? It was 3 hours. And I think the sad part about this film is they rushed it because they knew we can't have a 3-hour film because we don't have the attention spans that we had in the 90s and 2000s. And people hated the length of it. So we have to shorten it. And that was the wrong part of this because I think a lot of it was cut down. I think they cut corners. There wasn't a great ending to it. I think they could have added more with some of the characters in the Appalachian meeting, even just with kind of some of their outcomes. I did think it was a bit rushed. The runtime in this film is about 2 hours. So again, not incredibly long, just kind of, the typical length of a film. I think maybe 10 or 12 more minutes could have been just fine for this and it would have been good. I think all in all, it's actually a really good film. I think if you're a fan and you're watching me, you should watch it. Most of the people, this is a very boutique genre. We don't have this isn't a huge like true crime subset. This isn't a huge group. I think if you're watching this stuff, you would like this film. I think you obviously have to keep your perceived like notions out of it. Regardless of how you feel about it, like a Robert De Niro, he's an incredible actor. And even in this film, like if you take away like the dual roles, he is still the quintessential gangster. And the saddest part of this is the last time you will see Robert De Niro as a gangster. It's just that simple. I thought this was even a stretch having him do this. We had heard that The Irishman was going to be his last hurrah. It clearly is Joe Pesci's. But this is Brilliant's kind of ending. And I think the really eloquent kind of end of this film is the last word spoken in this film is by De Niro, life goes on. That's it. And that's kind of, I think, ironic in terms of De Niro's career as a mob actor. That's it. I'm not really a rating guy. I think this film's like a 6.7. I thought it was pretty good, honestly. There's kind of 3 or 4 levels of mob films. We'll say 3 levels. There's the Goodfellas, Casino, the high level ones, right? The tip top, some of the best films ever made. There's kind of a mid tier, right? So you're like your Bronx Tale, Donnie Brasco, some of the more fringe mob films. You even like your Gotti, right? Now, I believe that Gotti's one of the best actual mob films ever made, but I think a lot of people put it in that kind of mid tier. And then there's like the really bad ones, so like Gotti 90, what was that? A couple of years ago, the Travolta one, films like Witness to the Mob, Wannabes, like those films, like they were really bad. I thought this was kind of right below like your Donnie Brasco, those kind of films. So I guess you could probably say there are 4. There are the elite, the pretty good, the average, and then like the really bad. I think as well, and I'll kind of end it with this. In a mob film world where we're always talking about when are they going to do a show on this or a film on this, when we really think about it, there really isn't a lot of mob films or TV shows really out there. When you really think about it, other than like The Sopranos and maybe a few others, there's not a lot of documentaries that come out anymore. And the films are kind of few and far between. So I think anytime you get one, you need to accept it. You need to enjoy it. And I think this is definitely a decent film worth watching. It's definitely worth taking 2 hours and checking it out. And it is, again, the last great, kind of De Niro role. This kind of ends the career of Robert De Niro. I think my main takeaways were what I didn't like, the dual roles. I thought the only bad casting was the Gigante character. But again, I thought the good things about it was the historical accuracies. Most of the casting was terrific. And the last 30 minutes of this film is really good. So as far as a rating, like I said, I'd give it like a high 6, low 7. Definitely a film it would be worth checking out, I think, if I were you. And, from a historical accuracy standpoint, I thought they did a bang up job with at least that on this film. So should you check out Alto Knights? Absolutely. Are you going to be blown away? No. Is it the best film I've ever seen? No. Is it the worst film I've ever seen? No. It's just kind of in the middle, but it's worth checking out. I'll see you all next time here on The Sit Down.